and you'll see lots of shades. I mean, lots more browns than you used to. Now, you could say, well, maybe they just discovered that there's this market. Well, that market's been there a long time. But what they've discovered is that black women will continue to do their hair and buy cosmetics, or drive through a black neighborhood, and I call them lotion palaces, and you'll see, there'll be a Rite Aid, there'll be a CVS, there'll be a Walgreens, the Giant will have a bigger display, and that's because they've discovered that there's this market. Wait a minute, other people are not, they're stretching out the eyeliner a little longer, but black women, and we can go into those reasons as to why, but black women will stop doing something else, but they'll keep doing that. You'll hear, I have to get my hair done, and with have to, because it is expected that you will do that. And that's what I mean by recession proof, so that marketers will begin to, and I've seen it happen twice. In the last recession, there was a lot more variety of products for African Americans, and then when the society was more affluent, it actually constricted again, and then it has gone back out for this recession. There's another reason why African Americans are important in the mainstream culture. People who are not Americans often way overestimate, and sometimes Americans do too, the number of African Americans in this society. Do you know how many African Americans, the percentages of African Americans in this society? Take a guess.
It's around...
Not you. someone who doesn't have native knowledge, sorry.
I thought I knew the 2000 census, wasn't it like 13%?
Right, well that's actually pretty accurate. Is that what you were going to say too? I'm sorry. The
You're talking in the USA?
Yes. The gentleman who I told not you, is that what you were about to say, 13?
Yeah.
About 13%. Often people...
I think it might have been in our reading, folks.
Yeah, oh, okay, good. Oh, good for you. Good for both of you. It would have been bad if anybody else had misguessed that. Often people will judge much higher than that. And it's because African Americans are highly visible. And because African Americans, and actually the man I mentioned who was an undergrad in journalism actually just did his dissertation on this, they are important in the emotional life of the country. Whether slavery was the original sin, which both Ken Burns and Condoleezza Rice said, or whether there is still, as Patrick Grisonka's work says, still in most white Americans a sense of white guilt or white shame, there still is an emotional point to African Americans that's not there for other minority groups. And right now, Latinos are justifiably chafing because although they are the larger minority, African Americans still get much of the emotional attention. And what that means is that not having that fresh-faced little black kid in the ad looks like an omission. And you're seeing some of that change, but it's still very much the case. Now, young African Americans, and you know this, the younger people in the room know this, are very much the style leaders for a great many things, for clothes, for music, and that because the music talks about consumer goods, that then leads to more clothes. For instance, a student in American Studies is doing his senior thesis right now on, he happens to be the son of a furrier, and he's doing his thesis on hip hop and fur. Because fur has, if you haven't been paying attention, fur has come back. Now what happened with that is that many more white women stopped buying fur for political, environmental reasons. Who is buying more and more furs are middle and upper middle class women, and actually working class black women who he noticed were paying for their furs on time in installments. That's the style aspect. And you get that hip hop is leading that. So young women did not used to buy furs. Now young black women are buying furs, young black men are buying furs, and that leads back out to a larger white audience who use black hip hop artists as style leaders. That's what a style leader is. It's somebody who leads you into the market. Now, it has not always been the case. There used to be a truism in advertising that white people would not buy products advertised by black people except for certain things. Now, let's talk about Aunt Jemima. Do you have an old Aunt Jemima? I didn't even ask for an old Aunt Jemima. Wikipedia probably has an old Aunt Jemima ad. Aunt Jemima is a fictional character. I'm sorry. I I had a student who came to the University of Maryland. He was very, he bought all of his, he had never cooked before, and he went to the market for the first time, and he said, Dr. Parks, I'm sorry, I bought all Aunt Jemima asked because she was smiling at me. Aunt Jemima was created at a time, and there's a really interesting backstory that's been given to Aunt Jemima that involves Robert E. Lee being caught behind the Union lines and starving with his aide, and he doesn't know if he's going to make it, and he hears singing, and then he sees this mammy who's making pancakes for her children, for her many children, and he's starving, so he goes up to her, and she saves him by feeding him pancakes. Now, I think I'm a good moral person, but were I a slave and the commander of the Confederate Army was starving at my doorstep, I'm not so sure about that. But and then after the war, he vows that he will go back and find her, and he finds her, and she's still singing and still making her pancakes, and she gives him the recipe for the best pancakes in the world.
I don't believe that either.
Now, this is a story that was created to convince late 19th century, but really more 20th century women to buy cake mix, to buy pancake mix. Because, you know that pancakes from scratch are not as good as pancakes from the box. But the brand, and I actually have a colleague, Psyche Williams-Forson, who's written about black women in cooking. And she says that black women have a brand that's cooking, that black women don't have to convince anybody that they know how to cook. And actually, it was a type of scam after slavery. You could just walk up and say, I'll be your cook. And if you didn't know how to cook, by the time they figured it out, you would be gone and gone to the next job. But you didn't have to say, and there didn't have to be the story that black women have a long tradition of cooking, and if Aunt Jemima says your pancakes are good, therefore they're good. You didn't have to say it. You just left a black woman up there. And black actresses went around the country. You can sometimes in antiques stores find Aunt Jemima paraphernalia, and it says Eisentown, honey, and they would make pancakes. Sometimes they'd have to teach the actresses how to make pancakes, but they would show up and they would make pancakes, and people you've learned about value transfer?
Well, I was going to say, this is an example of how a stereotype is used in an ad, and because the culture accepts the notion, and it gets reinforced in the advertising.
And you have value transfer, where the value of the black woman cook gets transferred over to the mix. You understand what? Yeah, okay. All right. And so she's always smiling, and what she was playing on is that actually after the Civil War, there was an explosion of mammy images as the South comforted itself. And actually the cooks were some of the first slaves to leave. The domestic slaves were the first ones to leave, much to the dismay of slave owners. But the idea that the mammy, there was actually a monument almost built in Washington, D.C. to the faithful mammies, so that the South was trying to convince itself that their slaves had really loved them. And after the Civil War, the North became very interested in those stories, and so you would see them in the Atlantic Monthly and Lippicotts and magazines that we would have been surprised to. There is a present-day Aunt Jemima. There have been boycotts of Aunt Jemima. Aunt Jemima is very troubling to African Americans. Maybe one of the worst things you can call a black woman is mammy at this point. It's actually considered worse than the B word. And there have been boycotts and threats, and Quaker Oats has said, she's too valuable. We can't get rid of this icon. What they did is they updated her, and they made her a middle-class black woman. They took away her kerchief, and they gave her a do, which you now know is why that's important, that she has her perm, and she's got earrings. And Gladys Knight sometimes sings in their ads, and
we do have one of those. Oh wait, no, we don't have that one.
You have a radio ad, it says. Gladys Knight.
That's
a Coke radio ad. Okay.
Yeah, it's a Coke. Yeah.
You've probably seen them, right? It's okay. The other slave artifact that we have here, and he's taken a different turn, is Uncle Ben. Can you go back to Uncle Ben? Mm-hmm. Because Uncle Ben, of course, is an old slave. You probably had to read Uncle Tom's Cabin in what, the 8th grade, was that?